Please welcome the Fantastic Four.
Hi, how are you?
I'm so great because I got to see the Fantastic Four and I loved it so much.
Oh, thanks.
Outside of the obvious comic influences, I'm curious what some of your inspirations were going into this film.
Well, we defined the aesthetic as where Kirby meets Kubrick. So Jack Kirby, original creator with Stan Lee of Fantastic Four, and Stanley Kubrick, 2001, which was sort of the great retro-futuristic movie of that time. And so we really wanted to build a world that felt like it was drawing from Kirby's comics, but also drawing from what the best of the futurists were thinking in the 60s the world would look like. Then we'd bring that all back and make that real for the Fantastic Four, and that was their world.
There was even some audio moments that gave me a little Star Wars vibe. Yeah, I loved it. How good have you gotten at saying retro-futuristic? Because this has really tripped me up for the past few weeks.
Pretty good. Yep.
Pretty good.
Yep.
There have been a few live-action Fantastic Four movies. I'm curious, what you, maybe saw in them that you wanted to move forward, and some of those that, the lessons that you learned from those movies. How did you look at those in terms of influencing what you did here?
I was much more focused on the comics, really. Mm-hmm. I was looking at Kirby and Lee, which is why we put it in the 60s. They were created in the middle of the space race in a time when JFK optimism was, everywhere. People were looking to the stars and imagining putting a person on the moon, and the idea that the right heart and the right technology could solve anything. And that felt so true to who they were. That's just why we set it in the 60s. We wanted to get as close to their point of origin as we could, that kind of the DNA of the 60s as part of that story. So I really, really went deep on the Kirby and Lee run for the Fantastic Four. And then I was looking at all the other amazing runs, because this is 60 plus years now of comic history, and the best comic writers and artists have tackled these characters decade by decade, and there's so much to find when you go back to the comics as people were interpreting these characters.
Do you have a couple you could rattle off, if I'm hey, I want to dive in before I see this movie? That I should definitely go read?
For sure. The Hickman run is great, which goes right before sort of Secret Wars and Time Runs Out, which is, sort of obviously source material for future Marvel movies to come, is amazing. That's where he invented the Council of Reeds and a lot of other things that people know about, which are really exciting. And then the original run is great. Issue 1 is fantastic. It's amazing. It's Mole Man and all of that. It's great.
Yeah. I was so excited for the style of this movie, given how much I loved WandaVision, and I always kind of love the weirder, quirkier things in the MCU.
Yep.
How do those experiences compare?
Oh, they're both so joyful. I think of these two as the highlights of my directing career. Working on WandaVision was amazing. That world, the cast is incredible. Paul Bettany, Elizabeth Olsen, everybody, Catherine Hahn. We had so much fun, and it was very specific. And we had a lot of rehearsal before we started, because I wanted everybody to understand the sitcom realities and tone and style that we were in. And it was similar here. We had 3 weeks of rehearsal before we started shooting, because we were building a very specific world. We had to build a family that felt lived in, that felt real, and we had to build this 60s world that had a coherence to it in terms of aesthetics, but also style and tone and how you approach the movie. So both of them were stylistic and tonal experiments, which I love doing as a filmmaker. Very different, but some lessons learned between the two.
Yeah, like what?
Well, like rehearsal and being really specific, and world building from the smallest thing up. When we were doing sitcoms, we went and studied every sitcom there was. We talked to the guy who was the world's expert on laugh tracks. We watched old prints of
experts on laugh tracks.
There is.
That's
he has
awesome.
He has a podcast. It's
what
amazing.
a title.
And we watched old prints of Bewitched. What did it look like when it was filmed, as opposed to the transfers we all watch in syndication years later. And it was the same thing here. We went to the World's Fair in New York. We went to JPL. We, looked at old films. We had a film society at Pinewood where we would watch these movies from the 60s every week and try to pull from it. We did reference, looked at palette reference and color reference and old lenses and you name it. We did everything we could to get as close to being authentic as we could.
That's awesome. Do you, in your heart of hearts, believe that Wanda is really gone?
Wanda's never gone.
Thank you. Thank you. I refuse to believe it.
Yeah.
You stepped into this role taking over for John Watts, and I'm curious just your perspective of how that handoff works, and if there's any essence of what John was working on that's present in the film.
I'm not really sure what John was working on. You know,
you guys don't
No, I know he's great, and we've definitely talked about things over the years. But my impression was that he signed on, but was so busy with Spider-Man that by the time he got his head above water on that, it was time to kind of he was ready to kind of take a break from all of that.
I believe he said he was out of gas. Yes,
yes, exactly. So he's already said it. So when I came in, it was, we kind of built the thing from the ground up, So there was an existing outline that we started with and kind of worked on and built a story out of that and kind of, yeah, that's how this one came to be.
I think one of my favorite things, and it's not a knock on anything else, is that like you can just walk off the street and watch this. It's very contained, and I'm curious, like creatively, what that was like for you, because a lot of these MCU projects, of course, there's cameos and crossovers and things you really have to be conscious of that are happening in the universe at the same time. So what was that like for you?
Well, yeah.
Facing it in this other world? Because obviously, like you kind of had to. They couldn't. How else would you explain the Fantastic Four being around?
Yeah, they're such public figures that the idea that they were just hanging out in the 60s during our regular MCU timeline wouldn't work. Where were they when Thanos came? Where were they when Loki was attacking? Like, they would have done something. They would have been a part of that. So we did want to put them in their own universe for that reason. But then it offered this great opportunity, which is, if you know nothing about Marvel, come on in. The water is warm. Like, you will get everything you need to know about them and you can enjoy them. But you're also, if you're a Marvel fan, there's a lot for you in here as well. And eventually these characters will merge up with other MCU heroes and get connected to the main storyline. So it's a great entry point, because I think there are folks who thought, oh gosh, I'm not up to speed on Marvel and all for,
It's a lot. Like I can't deny that. It is. Yeah.
Yeah. And so this is a fresh one. Come on in. If you know nothing, this is a good one. Come on in.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to say, Vanessa Kirby's Sue Storm absolutely blew me away. She's the character I connected to so much. You had said, I think in an interview with Variety, that Reed Richards would go on to lead the Avengers, and people really ran with that. Is it secretly Sue, though?
So I actually didn't say that.
You didn't say that?
No.
Am I misreading, or you misquoted?
Well, the internet ran with it.
Okay.
So the question asked me about casting Pedro, and I was talking about Reed Richards in the comic books, and how Reed Richards is sometimes the cerebral scientist, sometimes he's off leading the Avengers, sometimes he's a father, husband, whatever. So I was talking about him in the comic books and about how there are so many different aspects to that character. Somebody who is believably the smartest man in the universe, somebody who will jump into the action and be believable, as a leader, and also somebody who has that emotional connection to their family, right? And that's why I was drawn to Pedro as such an incredible actor. So what he does in Avengers Doomsday, not for me to talk about. Talk to Joe or Anthony. I was just talking about reading the comic books and how I was, figuring out who could play him the best.
Okay, so we put that to bed. Okay. Well, we do know they're coming back for Avengers Doomsday. I'm curious, on their own, do you think that we could get more standalone Fantastic Four sequels?
Who knows? If the future is unknown, who knows?
Do you have a vision? Do you have anything in mind? Tell me something that we would be surprised to know about Herbie.
Well, Herbie's great. I mean, he is practical effect. I mean, we built a full animatronic.
I just met him in the hallway.
Amazing. So much personality brought to life also by a puppeteer named Jack Parker, who, staged the scenes just like an actor, operating Herbie, giving something for the other actors to act off of. And Herbie has a lot of personality. He's put upon, he's got a lot of stuff to do. He can sometimes be a little annoyed, but he's also loves his family. He's very much a part of this family. And so Jack brought him to life in great ways. So it's a real combination of VFX, puppetry, and a real animatronic Herbie. And I think that's a lot of his charm. But then the real secret sauce is Matthew Wood, who is our Skywalker sound guru, who was also involved in creating Wall-E and a lot of the droids in Star Wars. And
I do feel the Wall-E vibe, yeah.
He is the voice of General Grievous in Star Wars, and he is the little kind of almost human voice that you hear in when Herbie is talking. You can almost think you're hearing words, but you're not. That's Matt's vocalization.
I could have sworn he just said, "Oh, hey, girl" to me or something.
We'll face it together as a family.